I guess first up, what department are you in?
Plant and microbial biology at University of California, Berkeley.
Great, great. What got you into mycology? Was it just something you fell into, or was it you knew you wanted to do mycology, or what got you into it?
Well, I think I was always interested in fungi, but I didn't really realize that there was a career there in it, or a field even. Um, so, my younger years, I switched majors a lot, and ultimately finished in forestry. And then when I was starting a job in the Forest Service, I started collecting mushrooms just for fun. And I got interested in seeing the patterns of feeding of flies in the mushrooms, because I noticed that whenever I found the mushrooms, the flies had beaten me to it. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. I wonder how this works. And I started to get some ideas about how it might work and how I might pick this system apart and test it and figure out what was going on. And so I thought maybe I'll go to grad school and do this. So I went and talked to somebody in the plant pathology department at first, and told him this idea I had, and he said, that's real nice, but that's just a can. Literally called it a can of worms, which I couldn't argue with. But he wasn't real upbeat about it. And then I went to somebody in the botany department, David McLaughlin, and pitched it to him. He said, "This sounds like a great idea. Why don't you come here and do that?" So I thought, great, I'll go there and do that. So I intentionally went for a master's degree first. At that time, it wasn't unusual to do a master's and then a PhD. And I wanted to do a master's because I wasn't sure it was really academic material and that it was, destined for a PhD and an academic job. So I thought I'd ease into it, try a master's, see if I liked it. And bottom line was I got hooked and really enjoyed the freedom to work on things that interested me. And as I was in it, I started learning other things and got other ideas. And then when I finished there, I ultimately went on to University of Michigan, and there I was debating between sticking with the flies and boletes thing, which was going well and could have gone in other directions still, or switching to kind of an up-and-coming field at the time, which was molecular systematics. And there were people in Michigan at the time that were into that, but not people that knew fungi and were into that. So I ended up getting co-advised. I had an advisor who was a mycologist. That was Bob Schaefer. And then I had another advisor who was into the molecular systematics end of it, who was Jeff Palmer. And so things worked out well. The work I was doing at that time, how should I put it? It was not as straightforward as molecular systematics is today. Today you can learn it pretty easily, but at that time it was pretty much taking methods that were applied to really different realms of molecular biology and then bringing them into the world of systematics and phylogenetics. So it was a lot of work, but ultimately was fun work, and it worked out. And at that point, I was launched and went on to a postdoc at Berkeley on a grant I had actually written to work on boletes, and then a job opened up there, and I managed to get it. So it was kind of, there was a lot of luck involved, I would have to say. It's not, there wasn't a lot of pre-planning. It was mostly just following interest, and being able to change gears a little bit when things didn't work quite the way I expected them to, or whatnot.
Great. You actually brought up something interesting I wanted to, expand on. As one of the sort of pioneers in that molecular mycology area, we obviously have stronger technology to do, more sequencing faster,
Yeah.
to read it faster. Is there anything in particular apart from that that's made it a lot easier today, or maybe different from back in the 80s, 90s?
Well, I think you hit it on the head there that the techniques we use now are just so much more streamlined and kind of off the shelf techniques to use. Where at the time it was much more difficult, and the resolution of the data just sucked. I look back at the trees I made out of restriction enzyme mapping, and they were primitive, man. So I think one thing you have to realize is technology really has driven biology now for quite a while. As technology changes, it all of a sudden opens up all these classic questions that people always had but didn't have a way to address. And so keeping abreast of what's possible is really important. And what's possible is often not developed in mycology, because mycology is a small field without the resources of, say, molecular biology or medicine or whatnot. And so a lot of the developments oftentimes were there and then get adopted into our field. So the biggest change was technology, and staying with that technology was important too.
Yeah, great. Pull up a little list, only just 5 questions. See. Kind of sticking with academia, is there any a piece of advice that you would give to an early career mycologist, or maybe a college student who's interested in mycology to get more into the field?
Well, if that's where their interest is, read everything you can, interact with other people that know a lot, and don't neglect other fields, though. So as you're developing as a mycologist, stay broad. Learn your chemistry, learn your statistics, learn your ecology if that's your interest. Because really, most of the academic positions in mycology have always been sort of between fields. I wasn't really hired as a mycologist. I was hired as a plant pathologist, for example, and I know people that were hired as ecologists. Like most of my students got jobs as ecologists. So in order to get a job in a field other than mycology, you have to have good credentials there too and know what you're talking about. So certainly in the academic end of it, it's really good to have kind of a portfolio of knowledge, and really in an academic setting, that's easy to do, right? You're exposed to that stuff all the time, and if you have a kind of a hungry mind and follow up on this, that's how to do it. I think is follow your obsessions, but at the same time, don't close your eyes to everything else that's going on. Stay broad and be looking for things that can help you follow the track you want.
Yeah, that's a great point, because one of the things I'm going to talk about, hopefully some people from Oregon State, is that there's no mycology degree for undergraduates, right? You have to really find
my undergraduate degree was botany at the time, right? There was So you don't. That's right. You don't get a degree in mycology, and typically, you might take one course in it, maybe two. So you're really on your own to learn a lot of it, even in a good school. But if you're around people that are talking the talk, it helps.
Definitely. And I guess academia is a big part of mycology, of course, but arguably, another really important aspect is the community mycology. These so-called amateur mycologists who know quite a bit, of course. How would you recommend someone who's not in academia, who's more on that casual side? How would you advise them to, interact with people who are in academia? How could they help, or vice versa?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have great insight there. Certainly when I was in the Midwest, I had almost no interaction with the amateur mycological groups. When I went to the West Coast, it was a wholly different story. There were just like natural interactions. There were great big uh, groups that ran forays and ran workshops and invited me to give talks there. And so I ended up knowing a lot of people and interacting with this crowd, and became very impressed with the amount of knowledge that is out there in such citizen science groups. And the term amateur mycologist is really a misnomer, because a lot of the people that are in these groups are really well versed on the taxonomy of fungi, and may well be up on the literature in some realm of the field as well. So I would say locate a group like that and hang out with them, and you'll run into quite a range of humanity in such groups, but it's a good lot to hang out with.
Definitely. And I feel that way myself with our local group of trying. It's really great to see people getting more interested these days, and seeing that cross-play between academia and community.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you again so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Alrighty. Well, I'm here with Dr. Van Cotter. I guess what department? I know you're not necessarily in an academic position. What department have you been in? Any departments in particular?
Well, actually, my career was with industry as an industrial mycologist. But after retiring, becoming a semi-retired person as far as the industry side, just doing some consulting, been associated with the University of North Carolina, NC State, and Duke University. And I've maintained the relationship with the University of North Carolina with their herbarium.
Great. And I guess, let's see, I have a list of questions as well. Just double check and make sure. Okay. What sort of got you into mycology? Did you sort of fall into it, or was it something you knew you wanted to work with fungi? I know you were more plant pathology. Was it just fungi happened to be there, or I guess what?
Well, there were two key points. As an undergraduate, I worked as an assistant farm manager in cherry orchards in Michigan, and saw the damage that fungi could do to the crop, and how stringent and careful we had to be as far as protecting the crop against fungi. So that brought fungi to my attention. And then as an undergraduate at the University of New Hampshire, I needed another botany course, took mycology, and that solidified it.
And I guess, who'd you take that course with? Was it?
Well, it was with Dr. Bob Blanchard, who was Hanlon's student at Georgia. So I see Dr. Hanlon as my grandfather, if you will, in mycology. And then got my PhD under Orson Miller. So then Alexander Smith at Michigan, where I'm living now, is another mycological grandfather.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Orson Miller, you always hear his name as a big name.
Yeah, absolutely.
He actually, I think he described the species I'm currently working, or easily informally described as something like that.
Oh, okay.
I believe so. I need to double check.
That sounds right to me. Yeah, rings a bell. And from the mycology class at UNH, the Professor Blanchard, as I mentioned, offered me an assistantship to go into graduate school. So that doubly solidified my interest in mycology and pursuing mycology.
So I guess questions more for, the academic side. You've been in the professional industry and the academic side. How would you recommend people get into mycology, either field, more in academia or in industry, like you've been?
You mean as far as going into school or after school?
Maybe going into school. Maybe like what sort of advice would you have for someone, maybe in my position, or someone just starting college, knowing they want to go through plant pathology and fungi, or study fungi, I guess, more professionally?
Well, certainly attending a meeting like we're at, the Mycological Society of America meeting, just to see all the plethora of different types of research that are being done, to explore that, and all the opportunities to communicate with other people, to network. There's probably no better opportunity to get a feeling for all the different aspects of mycology. And then if one, as I was, also interested in the plant pathology side, other societies, like the American Phytopathological Society. Yeah, so I think the human interaction part is so important, and society meetings give you that.
Definitely. And I guess building off that, the human connection, oftentimes maybe people aren't wanting to go into the super academic part, but they still want to sort of contribute, maybe as a citizen scientist or I guess amateur mycologist. Is there anything that you recommend for those kind of people to maybe assist in academia somehow tangentially, maybe like for instance, like joining a club or helping with an herbarium?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of opportunities out there. For sure, get used to apps like iNaturalist and use that, and that can lead to other connections. But local, specifically with fungi, local mushroom clubs are a really great way to go on forays. The North American Mycological Association, another good organization to get to know. And really museums, universities in your area, visit them and make contacts that way.
Yeah, there's so many great opportunities nowadays, especially with the internet, right? You can search up a mushroom club and just find someone, right?
Absolutely. But in my world anyway, or the way I see things, get outdoors with people, explore nature and yeah.
Question for you. I've heard from someone in my lab, Ben Rose, since you work a lot with these plant pathogens and in these labs with so much experience, I've heard maybe a rumor, maybe like a sort of acquired skill that you could identify contaminants just by smelling incubators or just by smelling, just noticing little things that without even like doing any observations about the contaminant. Is that true, or is that,
that I personally
that
could?
You personally could?
Well, yes, to a degree. In fact, one thing that was kind of neat, we were harvesting an ectomycorrhizal experiment at Duke, so artificially inoculating pines and then taking it apart to determine the level of mycorrhization on the roots. And so in parallel to actually doing the quantitative, I would sniff them prior to and rate them, and the correlation was excellent.
Yeah. Did you put that in the paper, or was it...
Well, we didn't, but it was a fun thing to do. Yeah, the nose is really useful, and of course, just from an edibility standpoint, I've become involved in working in workshops as far as training people to become certified to commercially collect wild mushrooms and sell them, and that's certainly one of the things we teach there is use your nose as one of the criteria to make sure the quality is what it should be.
Definitely, yeah. Well, that's all the questions I had. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome, Clancy.
Yeah. So I guess introduce yourself a little bit. What department are you in? Where are you?
Hi. Well, as Clancy said, I'm Nancy Keller. I'm in two departments. This is a unique place at UW-Madison. You can bifurcate your departments if you want. So my tenure home is medical microbiology. Should I be facing you or the camera?
Me, either one's. Me, I think
okay,
me
it's
works.
better. Yeah. And then I also am 25% in plant pathology.
Great. Yeah, that's sort of the nature of fungi, right?
Yes, yeah, that's true.
I guess starting off, how did you get into mycology? Was it something you were planning to pursue, or something you kind of just fell into, or?
I fell into it. It's from my graduate days. So a little background. After I graduated from undergrad, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Sort of wanted to have an adventure, but do something that I thought could be helpful. So I joined the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. And I was in the Peace Corps for about 3 years. And one of the advisors there, as things were coming towards the end, I was getting really interested in agriculture because the people I lived with, the Basutu, they subsistence farmers, and sometimes they didn't have all the food they needed or it wasn't good. So one of the advisors in the Peace Corps in Lesotho had done his, I don't know if it was a master's or PhD, but Cornell University. And he suggested Cornell. I applied to many schools, but I applied to Cornell and I was accepted. And when I got there, I was actually placed with a new professor, Dr. Gary Bergstrom. He's become a good friend of mine. and he works with fungi. So I said, oh, cool. I mean, so, I said, oh, sure, I'll work with fungi. I didn't know that it was fungi I was going to fall in love with, but I did, and I was hooked with fungi ever since. And I've done different types of works with fungi. My master's was very applied. I was looking at the interaction with Calototricum graminicola and the European corn borer on maize yield. But then for my PhD, I wanted to get a little more, I guess, into wet lab molecular work, and that's when I started working. Then I worked with the corn pathogen Cochleobolus heterostrophes. I've worked with a lot of fungi. I'm lucky, and it just took off from there, I guess.
That often happens. You think, oh, I'm going to stick my whole career with this one fungus, and it's like it never happens, right?
Yeah.
Great. I guess sort of butting off that. For what advice would you have for, say, like an early career mycologist, or maybe someone who just started college or high school and thinks, I want to do something with fungi or mycology?
Yeah, so the sooner the better, really. Well, if you were in high school, if you're fortunate enough to live where there's even a community college or some sort of university, that'd be really great. I would just volunteer, honestly. There may not be a fungal lab, but any microbiology, just to get into a lab, get into the lab, and join forays. There's usually some sort of mycology group out there. I actually didn't do any when I was in high school. I didn't do any lab work. I always knew I liked science, but my time, if I had extra time, I was actually working to make some money. So, lifeguard.
Yeah.
So I would just try to get engaged and work in a group. And for the undergrad, it really is important. There's so many. If you can try so hard to do a lab, get some introduction in the lab, because that's going to let you know if that's really something you like and want to pursue. And I think these days it's a little harder. If, when we're looking for graduate students, honestly, somebody doesn't have lab experience, they're really not considered. And so someone like me, they probably wouldn't have wanted because I didn't have the lab experience. Also, I had the Peace Corps experience, and maybe they thought that was sort of interesting, a little different take. You can even do amateur sleuthing now. I mean, isn't it crazy? iNaturalist, all this stuff with iPhones that weren't even invented.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess kind of bouncing off that, is there any advice? So there's obviously a lot of interest in mushrooms and mycology, maybe outside of that, professional academia.
Right.
How do you think people like that who are interested, or maybe they don't want to spend their whole life on it, how do you think they could contribute to mycology, or maybe how mycologists could sort of work with these amateur mycologists, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's a real budding field.
Yeah, no, I said budding too, right?
Yeah, okay. I think citizen scientists could be very helpful. I personally have a little bit of a concern, though. So it's the macrofungi that people get interested in.
Yeah, because you work with
molds too. I mean, they're equally as fascinating. But I can understand these are charismatic, these big, beautiful.
They're charming mushrooms.
Yeah, they are. People should be a little careful. I mean, you can misidentify. You should talk to someone like Anne Pringle about that.
Yes.
Yeah, but I would do my best. I would take pictures, and there's all these books, but maybe what I might consider doing, I don't know, like a fine mushroom ecologist and email them, even if they live in another state or another country, and say, I'm really interested. Can I contribute to your research by identifying things? I think you really could.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see so many things that Anne's group could do.
Especially with the Golden Oyster Project. And
that's
that, right?
just one. Or the Amanita.
Yeah.
I mean, Muscaria. That one's an easy one to ID. But there's so many. On the other hand, if you're interested in molds, they're very easy to get to, just get soil, but then you'd have to have certain media and, inhibit the bacteria.
Well, that could be a good thing to start up, right? Submit your mold samples, right?
Right, yeah, no, that. In fact, we have a program here on campus called the Tiny Earth program.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, that Joe Handelsman has started, and she's a bacteriologist, so of course she focuses on bacteria. But what it is, she's working with, I'm not up to date with it, but she started it where she'd bring in high school teachers, I believe. This one, don't quote me.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Yeah, full fact check.
Yeah. Anyways, it's to bring in probably high school teachers or community college teachers to do some of this, looking for natural products or potential drugs, just learning how you could get isolating different bacteria and look at the crosstalk and the killing. And I said, oh, we'll bring fungi, the same thing too. Now they've started to bring in fungi.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and it's an easy thing to do. I mean, one thing I did that was a lot of fun, I did this when my daughter was in 6th grade. I can remember, it was hilarious. One of my students helped me. We went to a 6th grade class, and I just brought in agar plates, and then I had the kids go around, and I had little swabs and water, and just swab different places all over the school, and then swab it onto the petri dish, and just let's see. Oh, we got so many good things. And the one where we got the most, can you guess where?
Oh, well, in like a classroom?
Yeah, or any place in the school.
Any place in a school? Maybe a water fountain, or I wouldn't know exactly.
It's the keyboards.
The keyboard, wow. Yeah, because no one ever cleans them, huh?
Yeah, and all the kids use it. And the funny thing is when the results came in, a whole lot of kids would go to the toilets. Well, they were clean because the janitor put bleach in it. Oh, the keyboard was great. There's so many things, and it freaked the teacher out so much. And Nina told me after that, every day he took us all, he was going over the keyboards.
Yeah, that's great. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's definitely one of the things I'm planning on talking about here with people is K-12 education for. It's really
and everyone loves science experiments when they're younger. I guess you get jaded or something.
they see Niagara.
By the time you're 18, you're jaded, right? Yeah. But it's the early. The kids loved it, honestly. Yeah. And this is 6th grade, so it's pretty. It's
still, yeah. I assume kindergartens would be even more. They'd be like, "Wow,
I went to her date when she was before even kindergarten. No, they loved it. There's the one. You know how purple cabbage, the color changes the pH.
Yeah.
And I just took like lemon juice and baking soda and had them go back and forth and go, oh, purple, green. They were very excited, but they were too young to. That was just like blowing a balloon. Whereas in 6th grade they recognize more of a concept that there's microorganisms. So I think these kids were probably 4 when I went. And
it's hard to they're just starting to count. I don't know if they know like a billion micros. Right, what does that even?
No, but it was still fun.
Yeah.
But just so they can do things and see the excitement, because it sort of dies.
Well, maybe it's science education is very rote, right? But I think mycology brings that sort of random, like we can go into the forest like 20 different times and find 500 different things.
It does, right? Yeah.
I guess sort of one last question, because you're working with medical. I believe, was it Fusarium or
Aspergillus Vilgalys.
Aspergillus. Oftentimes we hear from the news or there about these fungal pathogens and how their incidence is increasing. Or it definitely is an increasing problem. Do you think it's maybe overblown, or it's maybe accurately represented, or I guess what's your opinion?
I don't think it's overblown. I think it's accurate, and the problem a lot has to do with antifungal resistance. So, there's 2 contributors. We can keep people alive now, but 50 years ago we couldn't, right? You probably even self-know. You don't know, I mean, anyone who has a transplant or autoimmune or this or that, they can use drugs now to keep themselves going, but those drugs lower their immune system. So we have a whole series of folks that are just honestly right petri dishes in some ways.
Yeah.
And so we just didn't have that before.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's that, and that's really added to it. But I think this antifungal resistance is a huge thing.
Yeah.
We're doing work on that ourselves, and so I don't think it's overblown. I really don't.
That's pretty. But that antifungal aspect is really like the driver of,
Well,
or one. I guess one
for
of
a
the
lot
drivers,
of them.
right?
So the World Health Organization, which I support, they, for the first time ever, they put some fungi on critical pathogen list. They had before only had it with bacteria and viruses, maybe some parasites.
Maybe.
And the ones they chose were Aspergillus fumigatus, Candida albicans, Candida auris, and Cryptococcus neoformans. And of those 4, 3 of them, the 2 Candida and Aspergillus, a lot driving it is their antifungal resistance. Crypto, not so much, but it's very serious still because, especially again, I mean, it's correlated with the AIDS epidemic, but we're controlling AIDS. We have been, I'm thinking of our policy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to say this because I might be the only medical mycologist you talk to, is often when we talk about infectious diseases and the number of them, people will say, oh, look, here's TB and malaria, and those 2 agents carry probably the highest infections, way more than fungi, but you can control them much better. And then when you look at deaths, the fungi, these 4 fungi I told you about, like mortality is way above that of TB and malaria. And if you looked at deaths, the fungi rise.
Really?
But I don't think that's known as well.
So it's more of like a co-infection, or maybe they already have pre-existing conditions, and maybe.
Well, it will be somebody that it can be a co-infection. I mean, there's this with COVID. There was Kappa, COVID-associated pulmonary aspergillosis. Oh, that was pretty devastating. Or mucormycosis
Yes,
in India.
I remember that.
Oh my God, that was just people with diabetes, COVID, got mucor, and so many deaths there. But it can be just yourself. But yeah, it's true. You have to have some a weakened immune system. So healthy people, you don't have to worry about it, really.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much
Okay.
again for spending some of your time. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
My
Yeah, thank
pleasure.
you. I'm here with Cathy Aime to talk again about MSA and a bit about your experience and all that. Down. Alrighty. So I guess to start off, what department are you in? If just for the folks at home.
I'm in the Department of Botany and Plant Pathology at Purdue University in Indiana. Yeah.
Go Boilermakers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess to start off, what got you into mycology? Was it something you knew you wanted to do from early on, or something you fell into, or I guess what's sort of your story there?
Yeah, no, I had no idea about fungi early on, so I definitely fell into it. I had I took a mycology class as an undergraduate just for the lab credits. I needed a few more lab credits to graduate. And I had a wonderful professor. His name was Orson Miller. And Orson was just a fantastic instructor, mentor, and mycologist. And I fell in love with the discipline during that.
Sure, yeah.
that class.
I believe Orson Miller wrote a bit on the fungus I was studying.
Yeah, sure.
I was looking, I was like, oh wait, that's.
He loved,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, they're such a charming. That's why you get people. They're charming mushroom, right?
exactly.
So I guess a question more about people trying to get into mycology. Obviously, MSA is about hopefully to share some of your research, especially for those just starting graduate school or even before, like undergraduates and all that. What piece of advice would you give to an undergraduate, early career mycologist, maybe even someone in high school who wants to get into mycology or the field of I guess fungi?
Well, I mean, there's an absolute critical need for more mycologists, so do it. As far as pursuing it professionally, I would just say, and I've had people in high schools, I've even had elementary school parents reach out to me, say their students want to get involved in mycology. So first thing do, reach out to your local state university mycologist. A lot of us do lab events or forays that can help you start to get involved. You can volunteer in a state university lab depending on the rules for the university, if they allow volunteers or not. As undergrads, get in touch with those mycologists as soon as you hit campus and see if you can start working in the lab.
Yeah.
Volunteering, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess where would one find mycologists? I mean, we know because we're here and we know the names, right? But I guess what would be a good search word, because not every mycologist even has the word mycologist near them, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. So again, I come from the state university system. I teach in the state university system. People reach me because they go to our university web pages, and they search for mycology or fungi or something, and that's how they get me. And that would be a good way to start if you didn't know where else.
So I guess next question I had more on the there's a lot of people who are interested in fungi or mycology, but maybe they don't want to spend their whole life on mycology, or maybe they're in another field and they want to learn more without getting knee deep into it, so to speak. How would you advise people who are amateur mycologists, or maybe just trying to learn more about fungi, to get into the field, maybe help professional mycologists like yourself?
Well, I'm old school, so reading is always where I start. Reading actual books written by experts.
At least people, right?
Yeah, by mycologists, I think is a good way to learn more about the fungi, see which ones really interest you. Reading papers and then contacting the authors of the papers in the area that interest you. If, again, depending on, I mean, collections are a great way. Most of us are involved in either herbaria or fungaria, either curation, direction, collections management. So again, get in touch with your local university, whether it's state university or a college, see if they have herbarium collections. Herbaria are just desperate and dying for people to come in and help with collections management. And it's a good way to get in, get known about that side of thing, and make yourself known to the professors who may need help in the research arena.
Yeah, great. And then I guess one final question, more about you've worked in academia and with the USDA, as far as I've heard.
Yeah.
How would you suggest people who are they're already in mycology? They know, how do you pick between academia or the government, or I guess industry as well, even?
Yeah, so industry, I don't have much experience. There are pros. I would have said, the world's upside down right now. So anything I say in this arena deals with before January of this year. There would have been pros and cons to either job. If you're a government scientist, and I've also worked at the National Science Foundation as well, where we don't do research, we just do service sorts of science. So working for the government used to be, the pros would be you don't have to worry about securing outside funding, right? You're funded, you have a very well-equipped lab, you usually have technical support. So you've got everything you need to run a program. The downside would be that, of course, you're doing science for the government, so there are directed areas in which you can work. In academia, presuming once you get tenure, of course, you have the academic freedom to pursue any line of research you want, but the burden is on you to support that research, so you pay the salaries for all your people and your students and technicians and stuff.
That's definitely the cost thing. That's huge, but like you mentioned, this year things are now.
Yeah, it's just impossible to predict now. It's not a very good scenario in either place right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, well, that's all the questions I had. Thank you so much again for sitting down with me, taking a bit of your time.
My
I
pleasure.
really appreciate it.
Are we on?
Yeah, we'll just get started. So you can look at me, you can look at the camera, wherever you. I don't know.
I don't want to stare at the
Let's
sun.
move forward a little bit.
Yeah.
It's nice enough here. Let's see. Let's see. So take a step back this way a little bit, kind of like facing towards the camera. We can talk like this, right?
Yeah, okay.
So I'm with Dr. Roy Halling of the New York Botanical Gardens and Columbia as well. Okay.
Well, I could be an adjunct professor.
Adjunct professor.
Because one of the things at the garden, we were a non-academic institution, but we could mentor students who were enrolled at universities. For example, New York University or the City University of New York or Columbia University. They had to fulfill all of the academic bits that the university required and all the hurdles and hoops and all that stuff. But I was basically their thesis advisor. And so once they did all of the intro and passed the first exams and so on, concentrated more on their thesis topics.
Yeah.
And so I had 4 PhD students come through over my tenure at New York, and 1 at Columbia and 3 at the City University of New York. Yeah, so it was nice over my career to work with these students and I learned a lot from them.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Really nice.
I'm sure you learn a lot doing anything in this field, right? There's always more. Another genus, another group.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So I guess to start off, how did you get into mycology, fungi? Is it something you fell into? Something you just really always enjoyed?
When I started college, I went to a community college in Southern California, and you had to, take certain biology courses and political science, all that jazz. But there was a botany professor in my first term. Just got me thrilled. I was always interested in plants because my dad was a farmer for the first 6 years of my life, but he was a farmer all his life in Iowa. And so I was interested in plants. And this botanist was teaching, and it just kind of got me, hey, that's kind of cool. And so when it came time to go to a 4-year college, by then I would have been a junior year, and I met a chap, another student, and we started talking, and he was from El Salvador, and I said, oh, Gustavo, what are you interested in? He said, I'm interested in fungi. Oh, really? And his major advisor was the mycologist at Stanislaus State. And okay, and I just, took every botany class I could, and this fellow taught intro to mycology, and I met him, and I thought, this is interesting. So I signed up for intro to mycology. The professor gets up on the bench in the front of the lab. He says, okay, welcome to what do we know about fungi? We don't know anything. And the 20 plus students in the class were all looking around you. Why the hell are we here? And he says, that's what we're going to find out. And so that just got me intrigued. And the professor, his name was Gotelli, grew up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. And often when we would go out on field trips, we'd go into the foothills and we'd see all these macrofungi. He had no idea what they were. Well, that's an Amanita or that's a bolete or something like that. But when we tried to figure out what species they were, and so when I finished my undergraduate, I said, Dr. Gotelli, what should I do? And he says, well, if you're interested in what those mushrooms are, maybe you should go to grad school. So I did. I went to San Francisco State, and that's the mycologist there was Harry Tiers, and he took me on, and that began my graduate career working on macrofungi. Yeah. And from there, then I went to UMass Amherst and worked on agarics for my PhD, and then a postdoc at the Farlow for 3 years. My mentor there was Don Feaster, and I asked him, I said, Don, what should I be doing as a postdoc here? And he goes, whatever you do, just make sure it makes the Farlow look good. And I said, okay. So basically I had a free rein to do, find projects to do. and whatnot. And that was fantastic because it just opened my eyes to all of this, the mycological world in the early 1980s, and it was fantastic.
I bet, yeah, having that freedom to choose a topic, I guess sometimes a blessing and a curse sometimes, right? Not knowing.
Well, you know, some of it was so, it wasn't planned, because I found some specimen pickled in alcohol or something in this cabinet outside my office, and all it said was number NO5. And I thought, so I said to Don, I said, you know what this is? He goes, oh, that's Roland Thaxter's handwriting. And discovered that he had gone on a trip to around Cape Horn when, out of 1910, 1911, I can't remember exactly, something like that. But he spent like a year just poking around in the southern Patagonian Antarctic beach forest. And what he had done is he had pickled some stuff that he had collected and put them in these jars. And so I just, what the heck? So I started looking at them, and it turns out that he had written a diary for that trip, and during that time it was in Punta Arenas along the Straits of Magellan through the Cape there. And these were things, and he kind of talked about them in his daily, you know, routine. And it turns out that some of these things were like, oh wow. Turns out they were the type specimens of certain things and all of this, you know, other stuff. So I just got to write a paper. It turned out it was Thaxter, because some of the specimens were of this, what used to be called a different genus, but it's now all in Cortinarius based on DNA samples. But Rolf Singer used some of those specimens to describe the genus Thaxterogaster.
Okay.
So that's how that genus got its name, based on Thaxter's collections from southern Chile. And so I wrote this paper. It's just Thaxters, Thaxterogasters, and other Chilean hypogeous fungi. It was, you know, but it was
perfect,
totally
right.
like, God, you know, if I hadn't opened that cabinet and kind of poked in, I would have.
It's spontaneity.
Spontaneity.
Right.
Spontaneity. Yeah.
So I guess one of the questions I'd have for, I guess, any mycologist, right, is how would one get into mycology? Say they're an early career mycologist, or they're just starting college, or even they're in their later years of high school. What advice would you give to that person who's, I want to do mycology, I'm not sure how?
Well, you take all of the mycology classes you can. Follow the lead of the professors or other students, you know, your colleagues, what they're doing. When I went for my PhD at UMass, there was a guy there, a fellow there, who had come a year before, and he got his master's degree in Northern California at Humboldt State with Dave Largent, and he came to work with Howard Bigelow, and I came a year later, and we just became pals, you know, like back and forth. What are you working on? What are you going to work on? And it was just like, you know, change it back and forth, every day, every week, for 3 years. And
So just having someone there just to
pick their brain, they'd pick yours, you know, work things out, do things for each other, you know. If you had a specialty, hey, can you do this for me?
Exactly.
You know, just trade back and forth, that kind of thing.
So finding those people who are.
Yeah, but you know what got me turned on was the guy, my undergraduate advisor, you know, that took us out in the woods, and he didn't know what the heck we were working on. You know, I said, "You're a mycologist, Dave. What are you talking? You're supposed to know this stuff."
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, but that's what got me intrigued. You know, I mean, I still like plants and botany and things, but back then, mycology was part of botany, so it didn't matter. But anyway, just having the opportunity and pursue it as much as, you know, go forward.
Much as you can.
Until. Yeah.
I guess a sort of related question to that. There are many people who are interested in fungi or mycology that maybe don't want to go into the field of mycology. Maybe it's like a hobby for them, or they're an amateur mycologist. Do you have any advice for those people to maybe help the people in academia, or maybe support them through, obviously, your work at the fungarium? What sort of advice would you give to that sort of person?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of citizen science groups in almost every town. And like in where I live now, there's a citizen mycology club called the Colorado Mycological Society, and there's a one further south in Colorado Springs called Pikes Peak. And so these two groups, have a bunch of just locals who are kind of into mycology, and I help them however they can. I mean, I'm not an expert, to say, you should do this or you should do that, but just trying to answer the questions, where can I go find this kind of mushroom or something like that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go into
but
so I guess go into academic.
Yeah, but it's, telling, informing neighbors, about, oh, take it easy there.
Yeah. Don't eat that one, right?
Yeah, don't eat that one. Or, it's okay if you mow your grass,
Yeah.
but if you pick the mushrooms, they're going to come back.
Yeah.
It's. I remember neighbors where we lived in New York, and they would put mulch down in their flower beds to keep the weeds from growing, and all of a sudden these stinkhorns would come up, and they were just, they were not only offended by the shape, but by the smell.
Yeah.
And so they go, Roy, how do I get rid of this? I said, well, you have to take all the mulch out.
Yeah.
Or just let it do its thing and it will be fine. Just, close your eyes and don't watch it. Or don't breathe.
No, yeah, that too.
don't go smell it. Or keep your dog away from it or something like that.
Keeping
But
with the community,
it's just stuff like that.
Yeah,
Try to keep them, bring them up to date on, well, if you take all the mulch, then you get rid of the fungus.
Exactly.
But if you leave it there, the fungus will go away. It's not going to kill anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, or if there's some disease or something like that,
Just being that sort of point for the community.
Yeah,
Getting
yeah.
more people.
yeah, not, yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess one last question.
Sure.
Sort of your work at the New York Botanical Gardens. Obviously, one of the biggest.
I did.
Yeah,
I-
well,
I'm
during your-
retired.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're retired, of course.
Yeah.
But during your time at the New York Botanical Gardens, what was something? It's again one of the largest collections this side of the world, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What sort of challenges are? I mean, maybe an interesting story or something that happened in your time there that was really maybe stuck out. Because a big question, right? But
Well, yeah, because it was a large collection, and it hadn't been, how do I say? I'd say curated, but that's the 50-cent word. It hadn't been really paid attention to and reorganized according to modern mycological science. It was to go there and try to organize and get everything properly organized so that if somebody asks you, hey, do you have a specimen of this? And I wouldn't have to spend 3 hours trying to find the damn thing. I could go, here it is. But the other thing is that type specimens are kept there and make sure that they were all labeled so that if somebody was trying to find the type specimen of this species described by William Merle, that you could go and find it and loan it to them so they could examine it or whatever for whatever scientific purposes they were doing. So just keeping track of stuff like that and making sure it stayed healthy and was properly boxed and curated, that kind of thing. And the other thing was that there were 4 these mycological clubs in the metro New York area. One was downtown, one was in New Jersey, one was out on Long Island, and there was one just in the county north of the metro New York area. So working with them, giving talks, whatever, and they would do forays and go with them on forays and just help out, however they were interested in it. Not trying to teach them or lead a foray, but just participate with them and enjoy the interaction, what we're finding and talk, that kind of thing, talk about it.
Well, that's herbarium work is underappreciated in my opinion, right? There's always someone who's got to keep track and keep collecting.
Right. Yeah, the historically important things that were there, and I found out when the Thaxterogaster paper that I was working on. It turns out that there were some specimens in New York, and I found so this is part of that collection that Thaxter collected in Chile in 1911 or whenever it was. And so I said, oh, duplicate. So you had to note that, there's a duplicate of the same thing in this institution. Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you so
Okay.
much for taking some time out of,
Clancy,
out of your
appreciate it.
day.
Anytime, man.
Dr. Meredith Blackwell, I guess talking about your experience in mycology, just general stuff, general
Okay.
questions. And it's super casual.
Okay.
Just a conversation.
Yep.
So no worries.
I'm one of those casual, accidental mycologists.
I hear
Most
ya.
of us don't go into the business. We don't grow up wanting to be a mycologist.
Yeah, that seems to be. I've talked to a couple people, and they're all like, yeah, I took one mushroom course, and and then I did a plant pathology course, and then now I've been at a grad school for 4 years. I'm like, okay, well now I have to, no. But
Well, mine wasn't that way.
no.
Because I was a history major, and then I wanted to study fish because I went on a deep sea fishing trip, and I studied fish. And then I happened to be in Texas and didn't like the fish guy I was working on a degree with. And so after getting my master's, then I went ahead and started looking for a job. I got a job with a mycologist, C.J. Alexopoulos, which was very lucky. And he was desperate. I was desperate for a job, so it worked out well. And then he encouraged me to get back in school. So that's how I became a mycologist. Very accidental.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's I should have asked this first. Could you tell me what department you're in? I guess for the people I know you're in.
Yeah, well, I'm retired,
Yeah.
but I was in the Department of Biology at Louisiana State University. At first it was a botany department, and then it changed, and we merged with zoology.
So I guess moving on to advice for new mycologists for maybe early career, or let's say you're starting college or even late high school. And I want to do mycology. I don't know how. What advice would you give to that person?
Well, it depends on the person a lot, but for me, I liked somebody with a lot of freedom for an advisor, and so I could do as I wanted. And I think the important thing for me was being able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, and so that worked out well. And yeah.
And then there's a lot of people who are starting to get interested in mycology and fungi, but they don't want to spend their whole life on it, or it's more of a hobby for them. How would you advise amateur mycologists or people who just like it as a hobby to engage with science or help academics?
Well, there are mushroom clubs too. If you live in, when I lived in Baton Rouge, there was one for the whole Gulf Coast, and so people didn't have meetings too often, but occasionally they would be able to get together several times a year, and so that worked. But most of the time in larger cities, you might have a mushroom club, like Julia Kerrigan. Have you talked to her?
Yes, Julia Kerrigan.
She has a great one. And she and two other mushroom clubs in Georgia, and I don't remember where the other one is, but they get together and they bring in really good speakers because they can pool their money, and they're all fairly close together geographically. Yeah.
And then I have one last question. Alongside all of your research, you've done so many side projects: the oral history of mycology, the phylogeny of mycologists, the hunting down for remind me of the genus.
Lobus pharangium.
Lobus pharangium. Is there any specific project that stood out to you as something that you like? It was a passion project, special? I guess I assume they're all passion projects.
Yeah, they are.
I guess what inspired all these side projects?
Well, the genealogy I started 40 years ago with Bob Gilbertson, who was at the University of Arizona. And he was really a history nut, loved Shakespeare. He would write on Ganodermus. He would write little quotations from Shakespeare poetry. But he was great fun. But he asked me one day, about my background, and I knew where my advisor had gone to school, but we didn't know anything beyond that. So that was what started us with the genealogy. And so we worked on that. He died a few years ago, and now, since my computer died that I was using on a MacDraw program, I had to switch, and New very nicely offered to retype the whole thing and help add to it. So New Win is now collaborating on it.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's been a big hobby for a number of years. The interviews with mycologists came about because I saw an interview at the Botanical Congress in St. Louis a number of years ago, and it was actually a demonstration to show you how to do an interview for history of, at that point, botany. So I was interested in it with Bob, with several different people, and we started doing it at the Mycological Congress in San Juan, Puerto Rico, a few years ago.
Great.
So.
Well, that's all the questions I have.
Okay, that was not long at all.
Yeah, no, not at all. So yeah, one with Dr. Joan Bennett at Rutgers University. I guess to introduce yourself, do you want to tell, say what university you are, what department you're in?
Okay. Joan Bennett. I'm a distinguished professor in the Department of Biochemistry and Microbiology at Rutgers University now, but as of August 1st, I'm going to be a professor in the Department of Evolution and Ecology at Tulane University. So you're catching me mid-job.
Yeah, there you go. Going to New Orleans, right?
That's right. I'm moving back to New Orleans, a city that I know and love, so I'm excited.
Great. Yeah, well, I guess the first question I would have is sort of for, I guess, a bit of your history. How did you get into mycology? Is it something you wanted to go into? Is it something you fell into? Or?
Well, like many women of my era, I did not expect to go to graduate school. And I went to a small liberal arts college where when I entered, I thought I was going to grow up and become a 5th grade teacher because it had been my favorite grade in school. But I soon discovered that if you wanted to be a teacher, you had to major in education, and I had heard education courses were horrible. So I went ahead and did a double major in botany and history. And people would say, what are you going to do with that? And I wasn't sure. Luckily for me, the summer after my junior year in college, I got an NSF summer fellowship. This program still runs, and got to spend the summer at Cornell University doing research. It was a plant breeding department. At the time, I think I pretty much expected if I became a scientist, I'd do something on green plants. And so I'm plant breeding. And at the end of the summer, the professor I worked with, and this is pretty much exactly what he said. He looked at me and says, you have a knack for this sort of thing, Joan. You ought to go to graduate school and become a cytogeneticist like Barbara McClintock. And I have to admit, I'd never heard of Barbara McClintock, who I now know is probably the most famous cytogeneticist who ever was. And she'd gone to Cornell, and probably this man didn't know any other women scientists. But it gave me something to do, and I said, gee, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with a botany and history major, but I can apply to graduate school. And so it was an era before the internet. And that meant when you applied to schools, you'd send off a postcard, and they would send you a hard copy catalog. And I probably sent off 15 of those postcards, and I got all the catalogs and went through them. And I still remember, and I don't know why it was so interesting, one of the catalogs listed in the botany department a course called fungal genetics. And I said, boy, would I ever like that course? And it turns out that that was the only school that gave me a fellowship. And I had a very pragmatic way of choosing a graduate school. I was offered a number of assistantships, and I probably shouldn't flaunt this, but I was rejected by Cornell. It was the only school that rejected me. And I wasn't applying to the agronomy department where I was, but plant breeding. And it's kind of funny, the school that started me along the line rejected me. Everybody else accepted me, but only one gave me the fellowship. And it was the school that had the fungal genetics course, the University of Chicago. And looking back on it, Chicago was certainly a wonderful choice. I didn't know that much about the University of Chicago at the time, but I loved the University of Chicago, and I'm proud to say that one of my children went to Chicago too, because it's a fine school. And I became a fungal geneticist. I'm still a fungal geneticist. I took that course, got an A, and I've never looked back, never looked back. And it was an era when people who studied fungi were still always in botany departments. And as you know, that's no longer the case. We've got our own kingdom finally.
Great. And I guess is that where you did your PhD also, or did you?
Yeah, I did my master's and PhD at the University of Chicago. Right. Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, next question for I guess a lot of people who are interested in mycology, they want to pursue mycology, but it's not super. There's no mycology degrees, right?
Right.
How would you advise someone who's an early career mycologist, or just starting college, or maybe even at the end of their high school career? How would you advise someone like that to get into the academia of mycology?
Yeah. Well, it depends what aspect. And now that I've been at it for a while, and I've been a member of the Mycological Society for half a century, I've also been a member of the American Society for Microbiology for just as long. And having spent a lot of time at ASM meetings, not MSA meetings, I know that there are many aspects of working with fungi that don't necessarily call themselves mycologists. But just think of the drug industry and the pharmaceutical industry and how many important drugs, starting with penicillin and then going on down the line, are made by fungi. And so there's a field of fermentation microbiology where a lot of the fermentation microbiologists are actually mycologists. Or in ecology departments, many ecology departments are filled with people who work with fungi. And you can go down the list of areas. Yeast, perfectly good fungus. A lot of stuff that has to do with yeast fermentations. Yeast is a fabulous model system for molecular biology. And so many people who work on yeast don't call themselves mycologists, and yet they've worked with a fungus all their life. And I actually would like it if MSA did a better job of attracting some of the people who are not taxonomists. And I just last night was having a conversation with people about the field, and I was editor-in-chief of Mycology for a while. And when I took on the job, one of my goals was to try to make it a broader journal, to bring in some of these things that I'm talking about. And it turns out it was not easy to do because people who were fermentation microbiologists didn't want to send their papers there because they didn't think they'd get read. And so to this day, I would like to see Mycology publish a broader area so that we could attract science from all across the field. Lots of people are working with fungi. They don't necessarily call themselves mycologists.
So looking for those people who might not call themselves mycologists because you'll learn a similar skill set.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think in going forward, because I've decided in recent years that I should become a more faithful attendee at MSA meetings. I'm a member of the society. I'm quite supportive, but used to be I'd only come once every 3 or 4 years. I've now come 3 years in a row. And I would like to broaden the scope. And so, like this year, did something on my own field in mycology. So it's kind of trying to mix the global warming, which has some ecology, with a little drug studies and stuff like that, and to move the boundaries of what mycologists are presenting at the meeting. And then I hope it'll also broaden the journal. Yeah.
Great, yeah. Sort of similar to that question, there's a lot of people who are getting interested in fungi. We talked about The Last of Us,
okay.
Right? But they don't want to get into the science, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they just like foraging, or maybe they're an amateur mycologist.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give to...
I'm sorry, I didn't do it, boss. I didn't do it, I promise. I didn't do it. Didn't do it, boss.
What sort of advice would you give to someone who's in that kind of category to either connect with other mycologists or, I guess, contribute to the field, even if they're not professionals?
Well, I think there's a lot to loose collaborations, and I often like to point out that one of the great things about mycology that it shares only with a few other sciences is that it's a field where amateurs have always made a lot of contribution. And the other two fields are astronomy and ornithology. There are a lot of bird watchers, there are a lot of sky watchers, well, there are a lot of fungus collectors. And sometimes it's just for the fun of collecting mushrooms and eating them. And there are amateur mycological societies across the United States and in England. My own ethnic roots are in Scandinavia, and I know that Scandinavians are big on going out and collecting fungi and drying them for winter and making mushroom soup. And I think it's something that mycologists should just embrace, that there are always going to be a lot of people who are not deeply scientifically interested in fungi, but they're interested in them for their culinary and nature properties. And then, of course, there's the whole drug scene that there are another group of people who aren't particularly interested in collecting most species or doing anything, but they recognize that fungi have some unique chemistry that interacts with mammalian chemistry in some very unique ways. So, we'll stop it there.
Yeah, no, definitely for having mycologists interact more with this. Again, like we said, they're amateur mycologists.
Right. They are, and I'm a big believer in the big umbrella. You know, you don't have to have a doctorate or whatever to appreciate the life form, to appreciate some aspects of it, and come into or let's use a better metaphor. Let's call it a tent instead of an umbrella, because we can make that much bigger. Big tent.
I guess sort of one last question, just more focused on your work in equity in science, obviously with the ASM. I guess I wanted to ask, with all of these new programs upcoming, the sports program, and we're trying to get more diversity for everyone in the North America, right? Is there anything that you've seen in your work aiming for the equity in science that maybe should be focused on maybe more, or something that they're doing that you want to highlight, or something?
Well, a lot of my life, when I was working on equity in science, I have to admit that the focus was on gender, and it was at a time when gender mostly meant male and female, and we weren't too much worried about pronouns or anything. And I'm happy to say we've pretty much won that battle. That there are lots of women now not only attending meetings, but in positions of authority. And we've had a whole series of female presidents of Mycological Society. But going forward, the diversity that I'm mostly concerned about is just frankly racial diversity. This is a very white meeting. There aren't even that many Asian people here. And I personally plan, when I get back settled in New Orleans, to try to work closely with a historically black university in New Orleans called Xavier. And I'd like to see us do some outreach programs to the HBCUs in the country, because there have always been some African American mycologists, but not as many as there should be. And I think that should be low-hanging fruit. It's easy. We could do a better job also collaborating with international groups, and there are definitely underrepresented populations in the United States. There are not a whole lot of Latino scientists, and I worry what is the adjective I'm supposed to use there. But we're doing better there than we are with African Americans. Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I had. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Clancy. Okay.
To start off, I guess I'm paranoid with that.
You got to turn it on.
I guess start off. What department are you in? What's your department?
I'm in the entomology and plant pathology department at North Carolina State University.
Great. And to get started, I guess, how did you get into mycology or fungi? Did you fall into it? Is it something you were like, I'm going to go into this? Or I guess, what's your story?
I guess probably it started when I was a little child. I was always outside. My mom was always wondering where I was at, and always come back from, outside playing. And I was usually looking at things in the soil, and I was usually pretty dirty when I got back to my house. My mother and father were always wondering what I was doing. So it probably started at some time then, but I think probably when I was an undergraduate. When I was an undergraduate at the University of Delaware, I remember I took a microbiology course, I took a plant science course, and also a soil science course all the same semester, and I started thinking that I wanted to start to look at like soil microorganisms and how they interact with plants. So I think, but they didn't really have a mycology course there. They had a mycologist, his name was Al Morehart, and you're only allowed to take his course you were a graduate student, but I actually kind of sat in on some of his classes, and there was another professor named Dr. Bob Carroll that was teaching plant pathology, so he was teaching us a lot about fungi. So I think kind of that sort of planted the seeds from the time which, I was a child. And then when I went to Illinois, I worked on fungi that were, again, associated with soybeans, plant associated, but they were associated with the seeds, not necessarily pathogens, but just different types. And at that time, I met Dr. Rogers, D.P. Rogers, and also Dr. Crane. So I think they also contributed to my sort of interest in mycology. But then it wasn't really until I was a grad student when I started working with Rytas. I was at NC State, and I would drive over to his place, because at that time they were just developing PCR, and they were working with Taylor and Bruns on some of the ITS primers. And so I would drive over there every week basically to do work on Rhizoctonia and try to understand kind of the relatedness of those fungi. And so then after that, then I was a postdoc in Rytas's lab. So yeah, it's kind of like a long history. I'm not sure there's actually a starting point, but I think it probably starts back when I was a child, and kind of has been like this progression, right? So I can't really pinpoint one exact specific time, and I guess the rest they say is history. So
yeah, that's how it is sometimes, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people in their careers, and yeah, for us, I think it's sort of like a lifelong adventure, and you stay on basically the trail your whole life. But a lot of people's careers, they switch a lot at times, and so in a way, I think myself and other colleagues, we're kind of unusual in that we've sort of stayed on the same track, and our whole careers. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good segue into, I guess, the next question, where a lot of mycologists obviously don't have mycology degrees. There's not like programs.
Right.
What sort of advice would you give maybe to yourself, maybe to newer mycologists starting college, finishing high school, on how to pursue mycology as in academia or through research?
Yeah, so I think there were, I think, one or two programs a long time ago, if I remember correctly. One was at Mississippi State, maybe. I don't know if that's still viable, but yeah, there's one or two. But you're right, I mean, there's not really a department of mycology. I work in a center called the Center for Integrated Fungal Research, so we have center-like entities not only here but all across the globe. But in general, if you want mycology training, you're going to have to go through some sort of like biology. Back then it was like botany or zoology, and kind of now a lot of those departments have sort of combined forces. And then there's also plant pathology related courses, or in even certain cases microbiology related programs where people will study fungi. But I think the most important thing is to take some sort of undergraduate course to get a little taste of it. And then if you really like it, and then you think maybe you want to go on in it, then one of the most important things, and this is also what I did different types of what I called internships when I was an undergraduate student. I worked mostly in a soil chemistry lab, soil microbiology. So I think it's really critical that students get some sort of hands-on laboratory-based experience to sort of complement the knowledge that they gained. And then beyond that, then again, sort of presenting their research, doing an independent research project in a lab, not just washing dishes, that they have a project for which they're responsible for, and then during the course of the project, then they need to present their results. Usually, initially at a smaller meeting, or maybe even an internal meeting in the university, and then beyond that, you can try to get some more experience by maybe taking a graduate course. I know a lot of undergrads are afraid of taking a graduate level course, but then a lot of my colleagues, they teach kind of like a split course. They'll teach like a course that's tailored for both undergrads as well as grad students, but I have two different types of graduate level course, so that then you could actually get more experience in understanding how you do mycology related research, so that that sort of complements your research experience.
Definitely.
You're always going to learn new things and go into new areas, because you always have to do that. You can't stay stagnant. But yeah, I think that's part of the process, I think. But sometimes now, though, back when I was a student, there wasn't a lot of opportunities when you were like, I don't know, say like middle school or high school even. So we do a lot of programs for kids that, again, if you see some sort of person that's interested, I can tell you the number of kids that are 9, and you've probably seen them on the 4A's, right? So yeah, it's amazing, like their interest level. And so whether or not they go on to do it, again, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but at least they're getting the opportunity to learn about something, because most people don't really understand that there is anything like mycology until they're an undergraduate, and maybe even a graduate student. So if you can actually get to them a little before, I think that's important as well.
Let's again segue into the next question. There's a lot of people who don't want to go into academia or research per se, like more casual, be like they watch The Last of Us or this, that, the other thing.
Yeah, right.
What advice would you have for someone who's like an amateur mycologist or just sort of interested in it to maybe help researchers or maybe learn more about mycology through that less serious perspective?
Yeah, there's there's opportunities for people in all different sort of areas. Okay, so I think you have to sort of decide what your contribution is going to be. So if you're not going on to be like me, an academic in an academic institution, I'm at a larger academic institution too, where you're actually teaching and doing research. Maybe you decide I want to go to a smaller place and you just want to teach, right? So that's okay. Or maybe you want to have a teaching kind of small research program. That's all right. Maybe you decide I don't want to be in academia. I can't tell you how many of my students start out saying they want to be, and then they'll come to me and they say, we don't think we want to go down this path. And I said, that's fine. What do you want to do? So I've had students that basically went on to work in the government, the federal government. So they worked at different aspects of mycology and different types of programs like USDA or USAID. Some students decided they wanted to do some sort of industry-related career, right? So a lot of famous mycologists were in industry that discovered, major metabolites of fungi. So you can actually make contributions, in industry. Maybe you decide, well, I want to do like a nonprofit. So there's a lot of nonprofits. So we have like the Triangle Land Conservancy here, or trying to think of some other Nature Serve, different types of, they're called NGOs, non-government organizations. So I think there's opportunities for that as well. But I remember back in the old days, we had a poster, MSA, that we developed and pretty much listed all the careers. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a poster. You should probably get a copy of it and just look at all the potential opportunities that a person can have that has some sort of fungal or mycology training. So I think the sort of sky's the limit, but it really depends on what your interests are. But again, it's always sort of being positioned like where you actually had an experience that provided you with an opportunity, and then that opportunity led to another opportunity. So I think that's how it typically works. You don't get like where I am by just jumping right into it. As I told you, it started probably when I was a child. But yeah, so I think that's really important, being surrounded by people, mentors. And I had some like really great mentors in my career that sort of led me to where I am now. And I'm grateful for all their mentoring over the years. And they're still mentoring me, a lot of them. Some have passed away. But yeah, that's a critical thing in any type of discipline, not just mycology. The mentoring is really something that I think is critical.
Yeah. No, I hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you've already identified like lots of mentors for you, and there's going to be even more, people that make impact on you and sort of then contribute to your directions or your opportunities. I'm an opportunistic person too, right? So if there's an opportunity, I'm usually trying to do it, right? But you got to watch you don't, get overloaded as well. But yeah, there's a balance there. So.
I guess one last question, sort of about we're here at obviously Cypher. I'm not sure if you were around at the beginning, or I think it was around 2013 when things started. You got your own room, right? How was that sort of group evolved? Are there any advantages to like one big super group versus just a lab, or a lot of questions? But.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, I was actually sort of in the initial wave of there was a small group. So how this center came to be, I don't remember the exact date. I'm thinking it was 2002. Don't quote me on that, but I'm thinking it was around then, because that's the time when Ralph Dean, he was actually sort of recruited to come here to run, and part of his recruitment, I don't know if you know who Ralph is. He was the person that studied Magnaporthia rising. He basically sequenced the first filamentous fungal genome. So he's got, like, I don't know how many thousands of citations, and he just recently retired. But he was the original director, the original vision of the center. So the idea was to try to bring people together that have different expertise in fungi. And as part of that process, they had to develop a charter, they had to get approval from the university, and then they also had to get approval from the University of North Carolina system. So there's a lot of centers in the system. And so ever since that approval, I believe in the early 2000s, that we're still a recognized entity within the there's not many centers that are still that started back then, right? There's some newer ones that have come online, so credit to Ralph for having the vision to sort of say, okay, well, we'll get, so the original group was Ralph Dean, there was Gary Payne, he worked on aflatoxin, and Margot Daub, who worked on, again, fungal toxins and Cercospora. So it was really, those three were the nucleus for the center. Then along came me and Ignacio Carbone. So they invited us to join the center because we brought different expertise, you know, that complemented their expertise. And then from that point on, we started adding more people that work with sort of fungi or microbes, or they're working on sort of soil science and meteorology. So the center has really expanded. The veterinary medicine, so yeah, the center, I believe, now has 19 members, right? And so you have people like Christine Hawks, right? So she does a lot of work on fungal ecology. You have Nick Buchler, who's over in the vet school. He does a lot of work on chytrids. So we have this sort of core group of people now where we try to interact with each other across different colleges, across different departments on fungal-related projects, right? And a lot of that also involves the training of graduate students as well as postdoctoral scientists and also undergraduate students. So that's sort of the vision of the center. So Ignacio's the current director of the center, and I'm the associate director. But that's where we're at now.
Yeah. Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you for taking some time out of your day.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed it.
To start off, do you want to say, I guess, your name, your department, what department you're in?
Yeah, my name is Nicholas Money. I'm a mycologist and a science writer, and I work at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. So we're close to Cincinnati.
Gotcha. And your department, I guess, is it?
Well, I've actually been running an undergraduate program called the Western Program for the last 15 years, but now, just in these weeks, I'm retiring from that position, and so I'm returning, in a sense, full time to the Department of Biology at Miami.
Gotcha. Great. How did you get into mycology? Obviously there's no mycology degrees, really. Is it something you fell into? Is it something you knew you wanted to do from a young age?
Right, it's a good question. I'm a product of, I suppose, a form of affirmative action that I went to a very good university, Bristol University in southern Britain, when did I go? 1980. And but I came from a state school, what we call comprehensive schools, which is actually, at that time, it was a relatively rare path to higher education, compared with kids that went to young people that went to private fee-paying schools in Britain. Anyway, so I got a big chip on my shoulder about that with my working class roots. So I get to this great university. I love biology, and I loved biology in high school, but I didn't know anything about the fungi. I get to college, I'm a biology major. It was actually botany and microbiology. And one of the first lectures I go to was given by this lovely man, Mike Madeline, who was a mycologist. He passed away a few years ago. And he started talking about the fungi in this intro biology lecture. I guess he did the little chunk on the fungi. And I just found it. I was mesmerized by it and by him. It was, yeah, it's an exaggeration. It was mind blowing. I had no idea that such an interesting slice of life the fungi were. And I ended up working in his lab as an undergraduate, and that was it. And then I'm 63 now, but so that's, a 40-year love affair with the fungi. Yeah, a long answer to your question, but that's how I but it didn't come from childhood. I had my grandmother on my mom's side took me into the woods and other places. I mean, she was a not formally educated natural historian, and so she introduced me to sort of a love of the natural world. But the fungi, I didn't really know anything about them until I went to college. Yeah, and I've been asked that question by high school students that profess this interest in fungi. I mean, the most important part of this is to become educated, oh, I don't know what, as a fully rounded scientist, taking some chemistry and physics, and there aren't really any shortcuts. And I fear sometimes with high school students that I talk to, they become interested in fungi. God forbid they've seen a TED talk about fungi saving the world, and so I want to become a mycologist. Well, there's not one thing that is a mycologist, right? I mean, and what? Developing your interest in fungi by going to a college where there are mycologists, and then sort of as I did, not sort of as I did, working with a mycologist, working in their lab and learning about this, and specializing in some area. Not that you need to pursue that forever, but yeah, that's the best advice. But you can't do this without learning some chemistry and physics and mathematics and other things. I mean, you again, there are no shortcuts, and but it depends what you want to do. Do you want to become a researcher later on after graduation? Are you interested in an academic career? It's obviously become, as I'm sure you're aware, increasingly difficult to obtain a university position. They're still there, but there are far fewer of them. When I joined it was difficult enough when I became a professor, but it's when I was searching for positions in the States, but it's more difficult today. So, but anyway, there are other paths, right? You can work in industry. There are many other paths. You can work in. We could go down the list, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I spoke with a couple people. I don't know if you've heard of Van Cotter, as well as Cathy Aime, who both,
Oh yeah, sure.
Cathy, worked for the USDA and did some NSF
Yeah.
work, and then Van went straight
Yep.
into industry, plant pathology, all that, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, another areas that people don't often think of that through consulting work that I've done in the area of indoor air quality, you meet people that are actually specialized in looking at fungal growth in homes and then many aspects of sort of clinical microbiology too, medical mycology, allergy and infectious disease, and so forth. I mean, so that's a powerful combination, perhaps being a MD, PhD with some specialization in human mycoses in disease. Yeah. Yeah. I got a friend too with a background in mycology that went to law school, and they specialize in well, number of different things, but patent law, I think they were studying initially, but having that scientific background and knowing something about fungi, yeah.
great. I guess next question, still relating to that sort of getting into mycology, but more people are getting interested sort of as a hobby. Maybe they are interested in fungi, but they don't want to pursue it as a career. Do you have any advice for those people who are, I just want to learn about fungi, or maybe if they want to help academics but don't want to dive into academia. Or if
Yeah,
you have any advice
yeah.
for those people.
A friend of mine, he's actually moved to Ohio now that he's retired. Michael Quo, and he edits the website. What's his mushroomexpert.com, is it? Michael's not an academic mycologist. He taught English in Illinois, a lot of postmodern literature that he. But anyway, his knowledge of the fungi, and especially out in the field. I mean, I've been out in the field with him, and it's astonishing actually the breadth of his knowledge and interests in at least the mushroom forming fungi. And I think that that's one of the great passions. It is one of the great passions of his life. So he's one example of somebody that's, and he's worked with academics too, collaborated with them on their projects because he's got this great field knowledge of the fungi. So yeah, in terms of advice, yeah, most states have a state mycology group or a group of local mycologists. There's where I live in Ohio, the Ohio Mushroom Society, and at least in the fall they have forays and meetings, every other week. So that's a great way of actually meeting other mycologists or people with an interest in fungi and learning something about fungal biology. Yeah. Well, I mean, this goes back to my essential hatred of humanity. I'd far rather that there were beautiful mushrooms and far fewer, if any, human beings. But I mean, I wrote a paper many years ago now about picking mushrooms, and I've looked back at that over the years, and there are things that I would change in that article now, but maybe not the essential message. And I still get disturbed when I see pictures of fungal forays and people are they're collecting every mushroom they can find and covering them on tables, and then the poor things they shrivel and they're put in a trash bag. I think there's a what's that? That's some kind of strange empathy that I have with the fungi themselves. Leave them alone. And but on another level, there is growing evidence that areas that are intensively picked, we're seeing changes, a diminution in the populations of fungi in those areas. And though some studies counter that, it's a matter of time. Intensive picking in the same areas again and again. We've got such a limited, appreciation of timescales as individual humans. But yeah, I'd be. And then actually in many wild areas now you see, edicts against picking wild mushrooms. We've got those in state parks in Ohio now with people stripping the woods. The effect on the mushroom populations over the long term, it's difficult to do those experiments. Some experiments have shown a very, very limited impact. And of course, we've got the attendant effects of climate change and other forms of chemical damage to ecosystems. Where were we? But yeah, when I wrote that article too, I was particularly troubled. There had been some sort of popular books on mushrooms, and one of them, this author had said, there's no possible way we can damage mushrooms by picking them because there's always more underneath ready to come up. I mean, that's so fundamentally silly that I had to write something. And I've written other contrarian articles. That one, yeah, it's probably due for an update, but the essential point there, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that how much of that I'd really change. Yeah, I am still against picking wild mushrooms.
Sure, my name's David Hibbett. I'm a professor of biology at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts. Well, I'm in a biology department. Clark University is a small school. We have only 2,000 undergraduates. So I'm in a biology department with 14 faculty members. Um, well, I've always kind of been a nature freak my whole life, and I went to college and I studied botany back when you could study botany for a major. And I took a mycology course from Howard Bigelow, and I had a couple. I had some summer courses, including one on fungal ecology at the U of Michigan Field Station. But I was also into mosses and algae and plants, vascular plants. And when I went to grad school, I was actually planning to study angiosperm systematics. That was my plan. And it's a long, boring story, but that first project on pitcher plants basically just blew up in my face. I spent over a year working on it, went nowhere with it. It was before PCR was available, so I am that old. And if we'd had PCR, my pitcher plant project would have worked out, but I was trying to do RFLPs and RNA sequencing and stuff and went nowhere. And so after more than a year in my PhD program, I needed a new project. And I was working in a lab headed by a mycologist, Rytas Vilgalys, because he was the only he was the only molecular evolutionary biologist in the botany department at Duke at that time. So he let me into his lab, and my plant project died. And I needed something new, and I'd always been interested in fungi along with everything else, so I just switched. Switched to fungi, and I'm so glad I did. But the bottom line is that I never planned any of this, and the reason I'm a mycologist is because I'm a failed plant botanist. So the power of positive failure. That's the reason I'm a mycologist. Yeah, I was Ritas's first PhD student. Um, and now he, at this point now he's trained so many students. He's really been incredibly influential. The number of people who have passed through his lab who have gone on to do really great work as teachers and as researchers. It's unbelievable. But yeah, I was there at the very outset. No, I don't think I was at the first MASMIC. I think that started before I got into graduate school, the Mid-Atlantic States Mycological Congress. But MASMIC was the first place that I gave an off-campus presentation. And I was a grad student, and I was very, very nervous. I wore a tie, um, which I very rarely do. And so I have a real fondness for MASMIC. I think it's a great regional conference. And we actually have something now in southern New England called Mass Myco that is really modeled on MASMIC. I'm super hesitant to give people advice because everybody's situation is different and times change, and um, so I'm kind of reluctant to give advice other than sort of the most general advice, like follow your heart, that sort of thing. Um, but it is certainly true that there are a lot of people now who are interested in mycology. Um, I mean, it's unbelievable the level of interest in fungi right now. I guess again, this is sort of general, very obvious advice, but be very clear-headed about what the opportunities are and what they are not. I mean, academia is a really tough path, more so now than at any time in my career. I mean, academia was a stressed industry before our current federal government administration came into power. And now it is under absolute all-out attack. The federal funding situation is terrible, and this incredible partnership between the federal government and academia that has yielded so many advances in basic research is really strained. So I would say be very clear-headed about what the opportunities are, but having said that, if you're passionate about something, then you absolutely must go for it. And one of the nice things about our field is that, for advanced training for PhD programs and so on, you can usually get an assistantship. So you don't need to go into massive debt to get advanced training in mycology, unlike medical school or something. So there are opportunities. I think what's tough is that the opportunities for people to be involved in fungal biology, either for basic research, environmental research, or business, without a PhD, outside of academia, outside of government labs, or outside of sort of traditional industries, are still quite limited. There are a lot of people that would like to do something with fungi in the realm of, say, food production or something like that, or alternative materials or meat substitutes or whatever. And those industries exist, and they're growing, but they're still tiny. And there are no obvious tracks to pursue them. There are no preparatory programs, college programs, or master's programs for, you know, fungal-based meat substitutes, for example. So some creativity is necessary. I think a lot of luck is necessary. Exploiting networks is necessary. But yeah, it's hard to get to be a professional mycologist. It's a tough thing to make happen, and it does require, I think, some sacrifice. Yeah, I think now that's a completely different situation, because if you're not looking at it as a means of making a livelihood and it's just something you want to tap into and be involved and be active, then you're in a really good position right now, because we have so many clubs, so many organizations, um, populated by really cool, generous, well-educated people. And when I say well-educated, I'm not talking about degrees, but I'm talking about people who just know a lot about fungi because they've been doing it. They've been out in the field, they've been reading and all that. There's these unbelievable communities to connect to. And the advice for them is simple. It's, find your local mushroom club. And if there isn't one, start one. Get involved with NAMA. Try to connect to professionals in your area, whether it's academia, industry, whatever. But there are so many opportunities now for people to get involved in doing bio blitzes, the fundus, rare fungal challenges, all that sort of thing. So there's all this activity, all facilitated by, the web, of course, groups that are based around iNaturalist. That's a really exciting scene. So, you can put a lot of energy into that, into that kind of mycology. And if you're not looking to make a living at it, all the better. And not everybody's life revolves around the job that they're paid for. A lot of people have very meaningful activities, passions that are not what they're paid to do. And it's all about that life balance. Not everybody has to be a workaholic, and some people can have a day job and then pour their energy outside of that into something like mycology. And now they can, because there are these communities. So I think it's a really great time to be a non-professional mycologist. I think the term amateur is a little, that's a little loaded. I mean, a lot of the so-called amateur mycologists out there are just like superb taxonomists, like way better than me, and better than I ever will be. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting time. And really, if you think about where the mycological knowledge resides, especially the taxonomic knowledge, um, I don't know if there's a way to quantify that, but it's in the brains of the non-professional mycologists. If you think about where does that knowledge live? Held sort of in RAM, so to speak. It's that those are the communities. Yeah, but people like that are like very high level folks. and others. But those are the names that everybody knows. But if you go to your local mushroom club, chances are you're going to run into people who know a lot. And those sort of local grassroots connections can be so powerful. Um, so yeah, it's a good time to be involved in mycology. Oid, I are you kidding me? No, really? That's a myth. Yeah. I don't know. It's a kind of cool myth. I mean, we could probably, yes, yes, absolutely. That was me. Boletoid, agaricoid, polyporoid. Yeah, no, no, no. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Um, well, you don't do it all by yourself, that's for sure. I mean, having Javier Tabima here at Clark is fantastic. I mean, he's one of my best friends and my closest colleague here. But having two mycology labs adjacent in a small college is remarkable. And Javi's got a great group of people. Um, and actually, Clark has had a history of having pretty good mycology. So Vernon Amajian was a very distinguished American lichenologist who was here at Clark. And in fact, I basically have his position. Um, and when I came, there was a fungal geneticist named Tom Leonard who was the chair of the department. So for a little while, Vernon and Tom and I were all in the department. We had three mycologists. Um, a guy named John Gibbons was here for a while, fungal genomicist who's now at UMass Amherst, good friend. So we've had, and now Javi. And so we've had this history of having multiple fungal biologists, which is incredible. I think that being at a small college helps. I mean, Clark is an unusual place. We've got 2,000 undergrads, but we also have a PhD program in biology, and we also have a master's program that lets our undergraduates transition from a bachelor's program to a master's program. But because we are a small college that really emphasizes undergraduate education, um, there's not a lot of distance between the faculty and the undergrads. So it's not like the kind of place where you have PIs that are running research empires and they're only talking to their postdocs and research associates and the postdocs and research associates talk to the PhD students and the PhD students talk to the undergraduates. Here it's a flat hierarchy. And I think that really helps us. I'm teaching mycology this fall, and the class is capped at 12. And so when you have small classes like that, and you have students that are doing research in your lab, that just sort of contributes to that sense of community, that sense of focus. So that's been really great. We have an undergraduate mycology club here at Clark, which includes people who are not science majors, lots of like art, psychology, geography, whatever. And that's a pretty cool thing. And nominally, I think I'm an advisor for that club, but it really runs itself. Um, and then we connect to the local amateur mycology scene. So the Boston Mycological Club, the Pioneer Valley Mycological Association, we do a lot with them. So all of that contributes to that community. And for me, that's really incredibly rewarding. I mean, I love doing science, I love writing papers and all that stuff, but having a community of humans to interact with is incredibly satisfying, really enriching. And I'm looking at retirement in a few years, and one of the things that I'm really apprehensive or nervous about is losing that contact. which I think would be really sad. So I'm going to, once I do retire, I'm going to be trying my best to sort of keep connected through the local scene because I won't have a lab here at Clark anymore. And that will be interesting. Yeah, it is. It is a lot, and teaching really is very intensive, and committee work and faculty governance and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a real strain. The teaching is fun, but it's also, it takes a lot of time and energy. And then, there's the research is really fun and exciting, but there's a lot of drudgery that goes along with that. There's writing grant proposals and submitting reports and managing budgets and that kind of stuff that, it is not fun. Although actually the writing of the grant proposals kind of is fun. I like that kind of persuasive writing, where you're trying to lay out your ideas and make a case. So that it's an interesting genre, the grant proposal, and I kind of like writing them. But I don't like the stress that's involved with writing them, and I don't like the stress that's involved when you don't get them, which is most of the time, right? Most of the proposals don't go anywhere. Yeah, my pleasure, Clancy. Thanks for talking.
What got you into fungi or mycology?
So I got into mycology at an early age because my family is Lithuanian, and so I grew up going out in the forest with my grandmother and my mother and my aunts and my uncles. We would go every summer. They had a summer place near Montreal. We'd go there collecting mushrooms with other Lithuanians. And so I learned to identify them, some of them, at that early age. And then later as a teenager, I was interested in botany and fungi, and so I took a class. I was a member of NAMA who taught the class in my hometown. Her name was Marge Morris, so I was probably 16 then. And she introduced me to Orson Miller's book. And so I had a chance to learn something. My other Lithuanian friends at the time, and I would also, when we'd go to summer camps or on backpacking trips, we would try to collect fungi. We didn't really make specimens, we just tried to identify them. And then, yeah, sort of one thing after another. In college, I did a couple of projects. My advisor, as it turned out, was a man named John Klaus, where I went to college in upstate New York. He encouraged me to join the Mycological Society, and he helped me put together a thesis project. It was just a mushroom photo collection. That was great. I wrote a couple of reports and so forth. So yeah, at that time, this would have been sort of the mid-70s. I didn't know anything about what graduate school would be like, but I quickly learned that, yeah, if you go to grad school, you could study mycology. It seemed like an easy thing to do. I didn't have a career plan, so I applied to grad school with Orson Miller. That's what people advised me to do, and it was good advice. And I ended up at Virginia Tech, and along with some other very great other young mycologists in training. And Orson Miller was a really good mentor. I mean, I think he had already an amazing reputation. So, and his advice as a mentor was that I should, become proficient in something beyond just mycology. So, as it turned out, DNA and protein, protein electrophoresis, all these sort of molecular techniques were just starting then, and that's how I got sucked in. I never expected that one would get a job. That was not plan A.
What fungus do you think has the most potential, I guess, for future use, maybe medicinally or?
Well, the most. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like what's your favorite mushroom? And I don't have a single favorite anymore because I've kind of done too many things, worked on too many different kinds of fungal projects. So it's hard to say which mushroom is like probably the most influential for humans and awareness. Probably Amanita muscaria, hands down. I think more people recognize it without even knowing its name. Everybody knows about yeasts and so forth, but they don't really know anything about the fungi. But I think, certainly mushrooms and like Amanita are the iconic thing that everybody thinks about.
So it's very charming.
It's charming. It's usually friendly. Yeah.
What's some advice you would give to someone, maybe a student or a hobbyist, that would help them get into mycology, or I guess maybe I said mycology.
Yeah. So, in terms of like going training as a mycologist, there's several ways people can go today. Yeah. I mean, the way I did it was through academia, and I think that's still a potential route for many people. But I think if you want to get into a grad school, a good program, and mycology is still one of those fields where you have to select the right mentor. So people still apply to work with a particular person. Although, in science and biology, you really want to apply to a very broad program. And if you want to get in to a great program, it's probably really important to start a research career early. Yeah, so when I went to graduate school in the late 70s, it was not required that you have like a publication or that you've done research. Whereas I think today it's gonna you need to, and as a grad student, if you want to get a job in academia or industry even, you better have some publications. So have a record, and I think that was something that Orson told me early on. You need to get something published, and so we have journals in mushroom taxonomy that are, easy to get started with. Mycotaxon was one of those journals where you provided your own peer review, initially, and that was a good idea. So that was where I started. Other things that Orson advised his students was to publish in the popular press. So he wrote field guides, and he advised us to do the same. He also, I wrote articles for journals, for magazines, more casual, and I think that, but I think that's the other route. And so I think today, some of the best mushroom people are not academics per se, but they are academically gifted people who study mushrooms and also all of the other sort of social side of mycology, and so that's another route that people go. Yeah, just like with YouTube. Yeah.